thank you all so much for being a part of this first ever virtual event. It was our Douglas Stewart's first time in having an event like this, and I know for most of you it was your first time ever being in an environment like this. So hopefully together we're sort of forging the way for some new possibilities in terms of communicating and connecting and collaborating with each other. So as we noted in the beginning when we kicked off yesterday morning, some really big topics and some big challenges ahead of us as an education industry. And one of the biggest challenges is how can we bridge the equity gap in terms of digital equity, in terms of financial equity, economic equity, and just make sure that all of our students and their families have the best shot possible at a successful life ahead of them. And so one of the partnerships that we have, and I feel so fortunate to have, is with the National Collaborative for Digital Equity. And that's something that we started up this summer, kind of as the pandemic was pulling itself out and we were all trying to figure out what was happening. But Robert McLaughlin has kind of led the way with that. And then there are a group of us that are partners with NCDE and helping to do our part and whatever we can to do the work needed to still bridge that gap, especially for low and moderate income communities, and including the banking industry as part of that as well, and just some really amazing and things that Bob has been spearheading for all of us, and we're here today to talk about that. So what I'd like to do is have all of our panelists kind of introduce themselves and their companies, and also, you know, how they are part of this movement together, and just all of our thoughts on do to make this better. So Bob, would love to start off with you.
Thank you, Sarah. This is such a treat to be with you all, and Sarah, I'm at least as excited about partnering with you and your colleagues at Douglas Stewart, and feeling very fortunate indeed about this, and with other panelists here as well. We're partnering in a larger way beyond this session on really looking at how can we move the needle on digital equity particularly for low-income learners and for rurally isolated learners. Do you want to dive in, or you want to do intros of all the panelists first, Sarah?
Yeah, let's do this, Bob. If you could maybe talk a little bit about NCDE and what your priorities are, and we can maybe touch on the CRA as part of that, and then we can come back around and dig in a little bit further. So.
That sounds super. Thank you. So the National Collaborative for Digital Equity, or NCDE, our website is at digitalequity.us, and you can see a bit about the mischief we're working hard to stir up. And our basic focus has been initially to affect federal policy that governs banks, actually. There's a statute that was passed in 1977 that continues to be enforced today for the banking world, called the Community Reinvestment Act, or CRA. And this is a federal statute that requires banks to make investments now that total over $480 billion a year for economic opportunity broadly in low and moderate income communities in bank service regions. So it's a huge sum of money, and we've been about first off, influencing federal policy to allow banks to have the option to earn credit towards their CRA requirement by investing in efforts that remove digital divide barriers to educational and economic opportunity. And to our astonishment, about 3 years ago, federal policymakers agreed. And so we pivoted since then to form the National Collaborative to help educate bankers and potential partners of theirs, educational system leaders, community leaders, and so on, to build partnerships to address the digital divide. One of the things we wanted bankers and others who don't come from sorry, I just saw a message from Terry Lee. I don't know if Sarah, if you're able to chat with him, he's trying to find where we
Okay,
are.
yes,
That popped.
no,
Sorry.
that's great. Thank you. I'll bring him in. You keep going,
You're
Bob.
welcome.
Perfect time.
You're welcome. Okay, so we'll press on. So Terry's one of our compatriots on the panel, and another wonderful soul. So, okay, so when, to my astonishment, we learned that we had succeeded in affecting federal policy, which means that some portion of $480 billion can go towards digital divide resources. We're going to talk about what that means in just a moment, I promise. But when we learned that, one of the things that I realized, and my colleagues who were working together to change this CRA policy, we realized there's a lot of educating we had to do for and with banking leaders to help them understand, please don't make the mistakes that we've made over the years in schools and colleges of education around technology, because it took us a while to really figure out how to do this well. That it's more than just put a computer lab in every school or give every kid a device and think, well, that should take care of it. The learning will magically happen. It's like, well, no, it's more complicated than that. And that leads to the first topic that Sarah has kindly asked me to share about briefly, which is a concept called systemic digital equity. And that's basically not going to be a newsflash for anybody in this room, that the digital divide, to be impactful, we need to provide, we need to get particularly low-income kids and their families, and for home access as well as at school, we need to make sure they have access to the obvious things like broadband and a device, ideally with a keyboard, so they can write essays, so they can apply for jobs, and all those things where a smartphone is just really, really, it's hard, it's not sufficient, we would argue. But there are less obvious dimensions that we think are equally important in a systemic, impactful approach to the digital divide. So 3 more dimensions we think are really important are tech support, and come back to that in a moment, and then high quality digital educational content, not only what's available on the public web, but what librarians can tell us is called the hidden web, fee-based, behind a paywall, academic resources that many schools and colleges subscribe to for their learners. And we want to make sure that bankers, when they consider providing support, they consider helping to subsidize equitable access to content, quality digital content. And last and not least, and this is, I would argue, the least obvious, unfortunately, but as important as any of the other dimensions of a systemic approach, which is access to librarian support. And our bias on that is that librarians, school librarians and public librarians, are crucial for helping learners develop skills around media literacy and digital literacy, of course, as we all know, but less obviously to cyber safety skills, but really, maybe least obvious, but as important as the others, is really helping kids and other low-income learners, adult learners, develop skills to try to mitigate against device and social network addiction, because we know that this can really affect, learning outcomes and engagement for learners. So let me just say one last thing about the key dimensions of a systemic approach to the digital divide. I promised to go back briefly and talk about tech support. A couple of things that we've been learning, which I know is going to be also not a newsflash to anybody in this room, that we have found in our work with school systems and community leaders and banking partners on making CRA, Community Reinvestment Act, grants and other kinds of supports for digital divide. 2 things we really push in particular are building tech support capacity in school systems with regard to pointing to sources of digital equity for resources, for example, affordable broadband, affordable devices, that there's tech support capacity that's needed around that. Also around e-learning pedagogy. One of the things that we're really learning as again, not a newsflash for all the tech-savvy folks in this room, is we've been really emphasizing that teachers and particularly parents who are new to online learning really need support for learning about and supporting effective e-learning pedagogy. And so that's a piece of this. And all of this then almost done, I promise, as a conceptual frame. So what we're saying, which is really, we're also saying, which is a bit of heresy as the digital equity fanatics that we are in my nonprofit, we're saying, well, digital equity is important, and that's great. Really, if that's all we do, and we're not satisfied with that. We've been saying to bankers and others that what we really need to be about is what we call systemic inclusion, which is really about building pathways to help low-income learners, particularly kids growing up in intergenerational poverty, get out of poverty. So we're saying if all we do is solve the digital divide, really, so what? If we don't help with other aspects of inclusion, financial, getting students financially literate, getting them bank accounts, but also particularly educational and economic inclusion, helping them learn about and develop skills and see themselves as having as much right to access to living wage careers as anybody else. So we're really trying to send a message early and often for low income that there are lots of ways in which if they persist in school, that there are living wage jobs available for them. And so if you think of the acronym FEED, F-E-E-D, these are the 4 dimensions of what we're calling systemic inclusion. So FEED stands for financial literacy and inclusion, getting unbanked families and learners of all ages. Economic inclusion, which is learning about pathways to living wage jobs. Educational inclusion, which has to do with are we making sure that learners have the opportunities and the resources they need to develop the skills, to get the jobs, to be able to generate the money to put in their bank accounts. And then lastly, digital inclusion, which has to do, of course, with are we getting them on the right side of the digital divide so that those barriers go away for them and they're able to participate fully in all these other aspects. So that said, Sarah, does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. And I would just say that this is, you're infectious with their passion about it. And I know all of us here on stage, you have infected in that way, in a positive way. And I think it's really great to see. I mean, you have been planting these seeds and lining this up for years. And I think part of the emphasis I wanted to have in this conversation is putting those pieces in place intentionally and knowing that, we need to start with piece 1 before we can get piece 2 and piece 3. And it's been talked about in many of the panels that I've listened to in the last 2 days about the need to provide things like broadband internet and devices for all our students. But to the point you just made, that doesn't solve the problem. That's just really getting the foundational basic, access to just start the process of really doing impactful work for equity. So thank you so much. And I kind of want to touch on what you were talking about with this unbanked problem, which is one of the things that you opened my eyes to early on, and how expensive it is to be in poverty, where I think it was something like 25% of low and medium income families, well, I'm going to get the statistic wrong, so you might have to correct me, but a high percentage of their annually is just spent on things like check cashing fees because they don't have a bank account, right?
Yes, that's exactly right. So the stats are pretty recent from the FDIC that unbanked families, families that don't have a checking account, as you're saying, they spend between 2.5% and 10% of their income on check cashing fees. So I mean, they're really preyed upon, and there are wonderful programs like Bank On that provide with no catch, no gotchas, free banking, no overdraft penalty fees, free financial literacy, and so on that we're partnering with. And you're right, they're a really exciting dimension of all this.
Indeed. Well, with that, I want to take it over to Tim. Tim Hagan with Education Associates. And Tim, would like to have you introduce yourself and talk about how you have some really great solutions for kind of dealing with that unbanked problem for LMI communities. Tim?
Thanks, Sarah. Well, first of all, I'm Tim Hagan with Education Associates, and we really at the heart of who we are is all about developing content. And the content that we're going to be talking about today and how we're very excited to be partnering with Douglas Stewart and Bob is through creating these living wage occupations. Obviously, it's important to bridge this digital divide and include these LMI, these low and moderate income families with digital access. But once they have access and once they have the ability to connect to the wild web, if you will, we want to be able to provide them with great lessons on living wages. And one of the living wage occupations that we've been talking about is actually careers in the banking industry. And one of the things that we piloted down in Orlando and that has worked well and we hope to expand through this partnership is it's kind of a three-way win-win-win when the banks get involved with local schools and local communities. One, all banks want to be a good partner with their community. So they want to be a good community partner, but they don't want to just write checks. They want to be able to write checks in an area that supports their community, that makes a difference, such as the things that Bob is talking about. But one of the things that we help them do is say, what if we help the kids in the school in the banking industry? So the second area is not only being a good community partner, but also helping the students learn about the banking industry or families learn about the banking industry. So that not only is teaching them about opening checking accounts and savings accounts and what borrowing money is like, but it's also about, in a small way, personal financial literacy, but in a large way, it's becoming getting out of the unbanked area. The third is in search of potentially having a career in the banking industry. Banks look at this as a way to recruit potential employees. So they see this as, a grand slam home run. Not only can they, one, be a good community partner, two, help the community open checking and savings accounts and understand how important that is. But three, it's also creating an opportunity to recruit potential employees from not only the student but adult population. So we see this as a perfect and a natural fit for what Bob and Douglas Stewart is doing. So we're very excited to be a part of this this whole movement. So
Thank
Sarah,
you
I
so
hope
much.
that helped tease that up.
Yes, thank you so much, Tim. And really, one of the things I love about what you do, and I know many of the people
Can
here
I
today.
just add, Sarah,
Yes,
just a
please.
quick comment about what Tim has described?
Yes, please.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Boy.
Can you hear us, Bob?
My sound is cut out.
Oh, goodness. Well, we can hear you, Bob. I'm messaging you in the chat. So, I think off mute. I'm going to pivot ahead here and see if we can get Bob up to speed. But while we're waiting on that, Miriam, I did want to tee it up for you as we talk about, having these devices in the hands of the students that need them, but also making sure that it's done in a way that's safe and also supporting mental health, because of anyone, these students are the ones that have the most challenges to struggle with. So can you introduce yourself with Go Guardian and how that kind of fits in this mix?
Yeah, definitely. And thank you for taking it over here. So as Sarah mentioned, my name's Miriam. I work at Go Guardian. And Go Guardian's mission during this whole pandemic, we're designed to help enable remote learning. And it's never been more of a perfect fit. We've never felt more of a sense of purpose as a company than we do now. And the reason being is everything we have has been designed to help with the unique situations or just to assist classroom learning environments. So our pillars were built around three main modules. One is Go Guardian Teacher, which is for teachers to actually use to engage with their students. So right now we have, as Sarah was saying, you have a ton of these devices that are just sent home. But now what? You're virtually giving students who receive these devices a key to the internet. We have to make sure that we're keeping students safe. And safe how? Students need to be filtered in the sense of having explicit content kept off of these devices. B, we need to have them be able to engage with teachers. So teachers now are able to actually open up their classroom sessions and resume with as much sense of normalcy as possible in the current situation we're in our global pandemic. So teachers can turn on their video, they can make it look like a lecture. Having sometimes even just seeing a familiar face is so important for students who are at home. And then the third pillar that I want to talk about is Beacon, which Sarah briefly touched on, but that's really what I want to focus on. And that's our mental health piece. So the mental health aspect is huge right now. We have students who are suddenly thrown in these different environments. School has been stripped away. They're home. The anxieties and the challenges of learning how to even learn in a remote environment. Not having your teachers, trusted counselors, having just familiar friends and support systems around. And oftentimes being home is not even safe for certain students. There's so many unfortunate products of being at home right now that have been bubbled up. And what Beacon does is it actually scans and constantly it uses our AI to actually make sure, reading through the documents pages, the browsing history, to make sure that students are mentally healthy and safe. And how we do that is by looking for suicide and self-harm prevention. So if there's any case where suddenly the technology picks up on maybe something as explicit as a student writing a suicide note, it bubbles that up and it actually alerts the counselor. Why is this important? Having just the notification is not enough. Action is a key thing to prevent self-harm and horrible cases where students actually do follow through and sometimes end up in being a suicide story, and we don't want that to happen, and especially now. So if there's a cry for help, so important to leverage the devices that are going out into different communities, into all these different homes, and to be able to actually engage with all of these students. Counselors will be able to see, they can notify parents, they can reach out, they can actually call local authorities, call the police, have them go show up to make sure, is this student safe? Make sure that they get the help that they need. And we designed this pre-pandemic, but it's just more than ever, we've realized now that mental health has become such a focus. And we want to make sure that children are not just safe on campus, but also safe now that they're off campus at home. So that's really a big mission for us and something that all of our engineers have been pouring resources into, because we want to create and maintain the strongest possible technology to make that happen.
Fantastic. Thank you, Miriam. And Robert, I think you might be back now, so I wanted to give you your floor.
Thank you. I am really thrilled with to be having the chance to work with Tim and Miriam. So when Miriam was describing the work of particularly Beacon, we're beginning to promote this to bankers and foundations and others. When we talk about essential dimensions of a systemic approach to the digital divide, I'll say this personally, I just think the world of the important, Beacon is incredibly important. It's very well done. And this, and in a COVID era that we're all living in, to know that, for those of us, the many of us who've been classroom teachers, we know that when a child walks in the classroom, you can often see, non-verbally or verbally, you can tell that kids are having a hard time at home, or they're hungry, or they're homeless, or they haven't slept, or worse, or they're very they're not in a good place emotionally. And the beauty of Beacon is it gives us a really good, safe, ethical way to make sure when we're not seeing kids face to face, this gives us something not as good as seeing the child walk in the classroom and spotting that way, but something that's almost as good and the best we can do in the COVID era. So just really, I'm just tremendously excited that we're getting the chance to educate philanthropic leaders that this is a really important aspect of all this. And I just wanted to echo belatedly, Tim's comments around the pathways into bank careers. One of the things that we are most excited about in working with Tim and his partners at Education Associates around the banking career pathways curriculum is that we know that one of the low-hanging fruit sort of ways of starting a partnership with one's bank is to help them with something that they care about, is making their own work more inclusive and to fill in-demand living wage jobs, which continues surprisingly to be a concern the bankers have. They have a lot of jobs that are available that aren't being filled, and they could be filled inclusively. And they're very excited about the idea of partnering with schools to build pipelines of more diverse kids into these, great, well-paying jobs. And this banking curriculum is a way that they can support access for students to get them into a larger conversation about how can they partner with school systems to build pathways for other careers as well.
Absolutely. Well, and with talking about kind of the social and emotional aspect of all of this as well for low and medium income communities, I want to take it over to Lawrence from Brainco to introduce, and hopefully many of you have already been introduced to what Brainco is doing on some of the other panels and with their Expo Hall booth. But Lawrence, can you please kind of tell us a little bit about where you guys fit into all this from both the social emotional learning and in some ways a career prep aspect? And I've put the link to our Platinum Partner page in the chat as well, and there are some really great links to some of the studies and the science behind what Brainco is doing as well. So take it away, Lawrence.
Thanks, Sarah. So absolutely pleased and tickled pink to be here. So thanks for the time. So Brainco is actually a startup out of the Harvard Innovation Lab in 2016, or it's when we actually became a company. And we're actually a neuroscience company that we make quite a few things. Some of you may have seen our STEM kit or may have seen our presentation regarding our myoelectric prosthetic, but we also make a wearable. And this actually was our first product, and the wearable is designed to actually measure student engagement in the classroom. So this is a great opportunity for teachers to understand what's engaging students and what isn't. And in the world of remote learning, we're working on a solution now that has the ability to work with the student with almost like what we call neuro-optimizing a platform. So that platform, you can find out whether the student's engaged, is it too easy, or is it too hard, and it can be adjusted based upon the level of that student. But also we have a product called Focus Calm, which is designed actually to help you reduce your stress in as little as typical 30 days, but it's designed there to actually get you in a state of calm. So it teaches you meditation, it teaches you how to get in that state, but then it also provides you with activities to complex mental tasks. And why that's important is because if you can remain in a state of relaxation and complete these complex mental tasks, it's what we call flow. It gets students or athletes or work, your normal 9-to-5 workers, into what we call that productive state, that state of flow. We've worked extensively with Formula One drivers, MotoGP. We also work with the United States Olympic teams, and we also work with a number of different schools throughout the United States and globally with this platform.
Wonderful. And so definitely check out all of the wonderful, amazing studies that are linked there on their website. And there is so much going on as part of this program, I should say, addressing some of the problems that we have. And if you would like to be looped into what we have going on and be a part of this, there's a link on that website to also kind of get subscribed to some of the information as well. So Terry Lee, come on up on stage with us here. I see you there, and we're able to get you here. I'd like to introduce Terry Lee from the FDIC, who is also a partner with us here. And Terry, I know you we're here for our panelists talking, but I know we've all talked about all of these things together so much. You're going to be a natural fit right in with everybody. And we've been talking about all the things you know so well. So I would love if you could tell a little bit about how the banking industry and FDIC is working with NCDE and the other partners to kind of address this problem together. And I've kind of put you on the spot, but so glad we could have you
I'll
here.
tell you what, thank you, Sarah, for that nice introduction. And it's good to be on the spot. Who knew there were two virtual worlds? I'm looking at my colleagues over here and looking around. I mean, I was wandering around in the other world and asking people. I was like, "Am I in the right spot?" And they would just disappear. And I was like, "Okay, well, that's one way to go about it." But then, of course, the concierge and everybody came up, and you sent a runner after me, and was able to pull me in. So I say all that to say, even in a virtual world, I think I might be the first person to be late. I don't know. I mean, my goodness.
No, you're just
You think
making
you
a
got
fabulous entrance is what you
Oh
did.
my goodness! You think you got everything nailed down, but it sounds like I'm standing between you all and the beach, so I don't want to keep you too long. But what I did want to share is, FDIC, just real quickly, and probably the folks on the panel might be tired of hearing me say this, but we're our mission is really to maintain the public confidence in the nation's banking system, and we do that through providing deposit insurance, through examining banks for supervision and compliance, and then we also take a look at them for receivership. If things kind of go sideways, we have to take care of them. But then you take a look at my group in community affairs, and there's several of us scattered across the nation. But I'm responsible for the Atlanta region, and in particular, the states of South Carolina and South Florida. And as of late, Alabama, and really what's exciting, and probably what's been shared already with the other amazing panelists, and I've had the pleasure of speaking with them and the like, is that FDIC taking a look at is this effort really falls in line with our economic inclusion approach. And when I say economic inclusion for us, we're taking a look at as a ladder, which is financial education, insured deposits, consumer credit, affordable mortgage credit, and small business. And when we take a look at the way this lines up with the work that Bob and his group is doing, and everybody else on the panel up here, it really dovetailed nicely into really making that systemic impact. And I'm not quite sure where everybody landed on the conversation with that, Sarah. Mm-hmm. But when we take a look and boil it down to the systemic impact, we recognize there's certain approaches that seem to be working and maybe work even more efficiently than the way things are done today, because that's really what we're trying to say, is that how this work is being done today, and given this virtual world and everybody being pushed to the homes, and then also some places having a hybrid. Well, we're really trying to promote this so that we're ready and we can give the LMI community a chance at success. Mm-hmm. And so taking a look at these key elements within the digital sphere, first of all, which kind of pulled me into this whole conference, and I'm so glad to be here, taking a look at these key digital elements, and how they all work together. Taking a look and saying, hey, it's more than just the two low-hanging fruits, the access to broadband and Wi-Fi and access to devices, which, by the way, are needed, and there's great ways to go about that whole process. But the other two that are not really talked about, that's what intrigued me, because we're taking a look at the whole sphere here when it comes to that. So, and that's strengthening the tech support, and then the resources within the hidden web. And I'm sure it's been mentioned that bringing that to scale, it really does help out with the cost, and sometimes that's a barrier for some communities. So taking a look at that approach to digital inclusion and then elevating that conversation up to include financial, education, economic, and this digital piece, that's when my eyes started lighting up even more so, because that's where we can really find out where the rubber meets the road with our initiative, which is like I said, really to maintain that stability. And we see this as a great approach to do that effort. And just and like I said, I'm not quite sure how much time I have actually, but nobody has thrown anything, no virtual tomatoes or anything this way. So I'm gonna keep going until somebody tells me to be quiet.
Keep going.
Sarah, and you can
Keep
do
going.
that, and you can
Mhm.
do that. So really, so again, what I said when I first came on is that what's being done with this approach, just siloed time, handing these disadvantaged, these impoverished communities these tools one at a time, is not getting it done. So we're really taking a look at the systemic approach, having everybody come together collectively. And from what I understand, I'm talking to a group of educators, and so that's a different feel all in its own, and how to maximize that effort. And I think of what we've been doing with the examples that we have up here on the panel, and I'm gonna get to know them even more, more so as the time goes on. But just the efforts that we have going on, I can speak for South Carolina, is that in addition to having this overlay with this systemic inclusion and this approach around digital equity, what we're looking to do, Sarah, if you don't mind me kind of pulling the cat out of the bag a little bit here, is taking a look at this notion around
Mhm.
bank on, which so standing up a bank on, and I'm not quite sure how many folks in the audience are familiar with bank on, but I'll just give a real brief pitch here. Is that bank on, they provide LMI individuals, or low and moderate income individuals, access to a safe and affordable account. And the accounts have features that keep them safe and affordable: no overdraft, no fees, and the like. And so having that account access really helps spur, and we believe at FDIC, it helps create economic opportunities for individuals. And so tying that and baking that into this whole notion around the financial education, economic and digital inclusion, baking that all together, having those conversations across the aisle, that there's a win-win-win type of situation for everybody. And oh, by the way, don't forget, we have to support our educators that are faced with the challenge of making sure that their students meet test requirements and so on and so forth. So how best do we address that too? Because that's part of the situation and the equation.
Mhm.
And so there's really a lot cooking here, and it's really good to see everybody sticking around in the audience. So Sarah, did I get at your
You
question?
did, Terry. Thank you so
Okay.
much. And I really think just said so many points so eloquently, and just as the rest of the panel. As you can all see, there's a lot going on here with this group, and we are really all pushing ahead for this systemic approach, which is really for this long-term, really solid, effective solution to bridge the equity gap in so many ways. So I thank you all for being here. And I would say, if any of you want to join us in this front, let us know. If you'd like to, do another one of these events where we dig in further, because we've really just scratched the surface of what Bob and Terry and all of us here have going on. There's amazing things happening in New Hampshire, and we're wanting to replicate that in other states. I'm working with Terry on getting a bank ongoing in South Carolina. And I know all of us here care so much about this. We've said at the beginning of this event, we're here for the education revolution. I know all of us here are wanting to do our part. So thank you all so much for being here. Let's join us together, and this is how we're going to change things for the better, and really, really appreciate everyone here, especially the panelists up on stage with me now. So please join me in giving a big round of applause with your floor key there, and